I am continuing my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am reading in a chronological order of events, not according to publication or volume, so I will be skipping around a bit as I move along. We are now going to return briefly to the book of Daniel. We're going to be doing Daniel chapter 3. And this is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego and the fiery furnace. It's a bit of a long chapter, but it's a fairly famous one, so I don't know how much we need to really talk about it. But just to put this in our timeline, our little context. Jehoiakim was king when these boys were taken captive into Babylon. 8 years later, Jehoiakim dies, his son Jehoiakim is taken into captivity, and Zedekiah is made king. So these guys are now, if they were, as I suspect, about 15 years old when they were taken captive, they are now only in their early 20s. Now, we don't know, I don't know if it says when this happened exactly, but it was still during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. And so it had to be not too long after, somewhere in this area. So at this time, I would still say they're probably in their 20s. I would say 23 is the youngest that they could be. They were at least 23, possibly up to about 30 years old when this happens. So keep that in mind, and let us read. Nebuchadnezzar creates a golden image and commands all men to worship it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego refuse and are cast into the fiery furnace. The Son of God preserves them, and they come forth unharmed. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains of the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together under the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and tongues and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." Therefore, at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. So a sackbut. I've never heard that one before myself. I mean, I've read it before, because I've read this before, but it never stuck in my mind. But in the footnotes, it says the Aramaic word denotes a triangular stringed instrument. That's all it says. So, and C, the dulcimer is Aramaic for bagpipes. Interesting. Now, I do want to say, some people have said this was a image of Nebuchadnezzar himself. He wanted people to worship him. I don't think so. I think he is setting up a image for others to worship. I actually think this is kind of based on his dream. He dreamed of an image, and now he has been successful. He has put down rebellions in Judah. He is setting up this image to honor the gods. And I honestly, I get the impression reading it this time, having read this in its historical in the timeline and everything, I almost get the impression, this could just be me, but I almost get the impression that Nebuchadnezzar was setting this up as kind of a way to honor God. So God showed me this image in my dreams, I will set this image up and we will worship it. And so it's kind of him projecting his dream into reality. That's my impression. Verse 8. Wherefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews, whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee, They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So now we have people are turning them in. That they're calling the hotline. They are reporting them for not obeying the king. Now, the playing of the music is the symbol or the sign to start worshiping. Was this set at a specific time of day? Was it every day? Was it once a week? We're not really told how often this went off. But it seems it was often enough that people noticed fairly quickly that these men were not doing this. But unlikely to be every day. I think it was more likely once a week. And so after maybe a month, people are starting to rat them out because they're not bowing down. Verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So I like this response from them. God could save us, and he might, but even if he doesn't, we're going to worship him. We will not worship these false pagan gods. I like their faith, because their faith isn't just, God's going to save us. It's like, God can save us if he chooses to. But regardless, I will still serve him. Again, remember, these are men in their 20s, mid-20s. They're not old men. They've been recently, or fairly recently, within maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, they were made rulers over the province of Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar, his anger isn't just that why aren't you worshiping my gods, but it's I elevated you. I put you in your positions, and you are disrespecting me. This is a personal insult against Nebuchadnezzar. And if we take the view that this statue is kind of a projection of his dream, he was told that this dream was given to him by the God of the Jews. And so he's setting up this image almost as a tribute to the God of the Jews, in a way, a pagan's tribute. And for these Jews to ignore it and blaspheme against the king, this is a high insult. This is a great insult against him. This is why he's angry. Verse 19. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth, and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego came forth of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego in the province of Babylon. So there you have it. They were tossed in bound, not just having their hands tied, but their clothes, they were wrapped up in ropes so that their clothes were bound to their bodies. And when the king looks in, they're standing up, they're walking around, no bindings. And he says, the Son of God, it's a good chance that this was Christ. That Christ himself came down. So, but Nebuchadnezzar's reaction, bring him out. He elevates them and he says, okay, now nobody is allowed to say anything against the God of Israel. That is a powerful God. And he admits that no other God could do these kind of things. Not even his personal God, Marduk, I believe was one that Nebuchadnezzar really liked. But only the God of Israel has this kind of power. But it's a familiar story, so we don't need to say much more about it. We'll leave that here, and we're going to have some fun next. So stay tuned. See you next.